Today we're going to talk about narrative analysis. And this is the one qualitative method that really has a kind of a parallel on the quantitative side of the universe. The content analysis. Aaron has had me for quantitative research. Savannah has had me for quantitative research. Kristen had me way back in the day in quantitative research. Anybody else? Okay. Give me a couple of characteristics of content analysis.
Going through and counting the occurrences.
Counting occurrences. There's no spell check on a whiteboard. That's right, isn't it?
We can fix it in post.
We'll fix it in post. There we go. You're counting occurrences. How many times a phrase is uttered? How many times a logo is displayed? How many times a look is given? Okay. The Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue came out the other day. I scored really cool points with my wife because it went immediately into the trash. She looked at it, said, "This is just pornography." I went, "Where is it?" Kidding, just kidding.
On film.
But you could look at that and say, and
that
you
just
come up.
proves that I'm ahead of you.
I didn't look. I just never mind.
Read the articles.
Yeah, I actually had a student who said that he was looking forward to reading the articles. And I went, "You aren't reading the articles." But you could come up with your own definition based on what you read in the literature about pornography and how many of these pictures are pornographic. Okay, you come up with latent and manifest variables. What's the difference? What's a latent variable? What's a manifest variable? Please, one of you come through for me.
Latent's where it's like you have to dig for it. It's not as obvious.
So what's manifest?
The one that you are looking for.
Manifest are the ones you're looking for. You can see them. I did a study where I did a content analysis looking at how, whether athletic websites utilized social media and multimedia. The manifest variables were things like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram. And I looked to see if they had those, if they were present. It's a latent variable that yes, they did use social media if 3 of those 4 were present. If there was only 1 present, they used Facebook. I mean, it's a social media tool, but they weren't really invested in social media. Okay, so you're defining terms that way, you're developing them that way. Okay, but the main thing we're talking about here is you're counting occurrences. What else? What's another characteristic? Anything you can tell me about content analysis?
You use surveys.
Hmm?
You use surveys.
You don't use, it's not a survey, it's a code book. Code
yeah, that,
yeah.
Yes.
You develop codes. So you got a code book and a code sheet, or coding sheet.
Is code X part of that CODEC?
No.
Unrelated.
Code book is where you're defining what these terms are, how you want your people looking at it, and that's a hint for one of the next points I'm going to make. How you want your people looking at that website or at that newspaper or at that television show or that newscast. The coding sheet's where they're actually marking it. So it becomes, the coding sheet kind of becomes like a survey. You're doing the hash marks. Yes, it's here, no, it's not, yes, it is, no, it's not, that sort of. Okay. How many people are involved when you do a content analysis? How many people are typically involved in the actual study?
At least 2.
At least 2. Why?
So then you can't bias the results? Or it's harder to bias the results?
Protects against bias. From the lead author, because I know exactly what it is I'm looking for. And I can look at that picture and say, well, that doesn't really fit exactly with what I wrote down, but yeah, that fits. And so I use it. Okay. And because I've got 2 people coding and comparing, do they agree or do they disagree, we call that intercoder reliability. I can build reliability. Okay. What are we looking at? Where are we getting our data? Newspapers.
Yeah.
Transcripts,
Movies.
or just like movie scripts,
Magazines.
shows, advertisements.
All media?
Yeah, any kind of media.
Even if it's just sitting around a coffee shop, listening, people and seeing how many times they do this?
No.
Okay.
No. The reason being, it has to be something set in time. We have to have something concrete to look at. So unless you're gonna record them and transcribe what they said and then count how many times they said it, you can't do it that way. Okay, you got the right idea, but, okay? So we're counting occurrences, how many times a term is used, how many times a photograph is used, how many times a look, anything like that appears. You develop a coding book, or a code book and a coding sheet so you can document and you can keep track of your notes. It's going to take at least 2 people. Write that in there. People. Typically 2 people, because if you get more than 2, then you start getting into a little bit more of, well, we agree, but he doesn't. And then we agree, but she doesn't. And finally, we agree, but he's not agreeing, and so Aaron, bye-bye. Okay? Because we're getting too much conflict here. All right?
Well, around this, I don't know, I've got a lot to say right now, but
That's okay.
I've got more questions than.
Sure.
I did a paper the previous semester, and when it was a small research about newspapers that use certain terminology.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was going through, it's like, oh, that word's there also. And I added it to the list as I was going through. So, but it was absolutely necessary once just I neglected. So then add that word to it, to the list, and then for the second person to do it, or go with the original?
Go with your original. That's why you have the 2 people. Because if you've got one person doing it, that's going to happen more often than you think. If you've got 2 people doing it, you can both maybe come across that term and say, you know, and you do a whole process. I'm not going to get into this whole process, but a whole process of coder training before you actually start coding your data. Okay, that's when you can find those types of things out. And if it doesn't make, once you start coding your data, you're done. And that becomes a limitation. We found as we were coding, there were terms we never even thought of. Okay, that's where your literature review comes in. That's where the 2 people doing their coder training and actually getting into it right then, where they can find some of those things comes up. That's why you do that. Okay? Because by doing that, again, you're protecting against bias, and you're also building that intercoder reliability. Because remember, in quantitative research, reliability is critical. What is reliability?
Trust.
Trust.
Well, every time this phenomenon happens, the result will be the same every time.
We're looking for replicability, that if we were to do that, take this same procedure, so like I look at 2,000 articles, and I've got this code book defined, okay, and these terms defined. Now if I look at 2,000 more, I'm going to get similar results. So you're building that reliability because you want to be able to what with quantitative research? Predict and generalize, okay? So it's critical in quantitative research.
Find truth.
Do what?
Find truth.
Find truth, yeah. You're going to look at newspapers, transcripts, shows, advertisements, those types of things, okay?
Now, when you writing a code book up there for some that may not have taken quantitative and never did content analysis, you mean like defining exactly what the specifics of what you're looking for is, because when we did the online newspapers, that was when we did that as our first one, it was rough because you go through and you define something and you go back and look at your next set and you see 20 different things and you're like, oh, okay, wait a second.
Yeah.
Did we define what we were going to be looking for good enough?
Yeah. This code book, you establish an initial code book. As you go through your coder training, it may change some. But once you get to a point where you have intercoder reliability, and that can be based on percent agreement, it can be based on Krippendorf's alpha. Take quantitative, you'll learn what those mean. Okay. Once you're there, you're ready to go with your study, and that's the code book you stay with. Okay. But yeah, like Aaron's saying, as they're going through the training and looking through the early ones, they found terms that, oh, I didn't even think about that one. That fits too. You can add them in then, after that. Okay. All right. So that's a content analysis, quantitative. Because why? We're counting. Okay. Narrative analysis, let's start down here at the bottom. What are you analyzing? What are you looking at?
Stories.
Stories. Newspapers. What else might you look at?
Films.
Films.
Written
TV coverage?
Written words. Letters, like personal letters. Biographies. Diaries. Blogs. What'd you say, Alex?
Television.
Television shows?
Stories, yeah.
Commercials.
Commercials. Okay. What are you trying to find? We're trying to find how many times a term is used over here. Term, image, variable, whatever is used. How many times? What are you trying to find in a narrative? Themes. As a qualitative researcher, what are you going to be doing with the data? I mean, you're looking for these themes, but what are you trying to do with it? Understand?
Interpret, maybe?
Interpret. That's what I was looking for. How many people are involved in the study? One. Can you have more than one? Yeah, but am I going to interpret things the same way as Savannah? Why not?
Do you have different experiences and backgrounds?
We have different experiences, different backgrounds. What about John and I? We're going to interpret things the same way?
Yes.
You think so? Okay.
The exact same way.
Exact same way. We are clones, if you hadn't noticed. That's my twin over there. Okay. How are you going to be getting your data? I suppose, like with the code book for content analysis. I should have flipped these. How are you going to be doing that with the narrative analysis?
Not keywords necessarily, but maybe like what they're talking about, maybe?
But where are you putting this?
We still have a similar.
Similar sort of thing. It's going to be more like transcripts. Document analysis. Document, nice.
So when you're saying these, this is your recordings, the researcher's recordings
Yeah.
on a transcript or, okay.
Yep. And when I say transcript, you think about films, think about television shows, commercials. I want to get the transcript. I want to get that printed part of it. Because otherwise, I'm going to have to watch this over and over and over to try and make sure I hit everything. Okay.
You said that the transcripts and document analysis were like kind of the equivalent to the code book?
Yeah. Well, these things, the document analysis that I'm doing, I'm trying to get these documents and I can make notes on the documents.
Okay.
Okay? Versus I create this code book myself. I'm coming up and I'm defining what the terms are and what the occurrences are that I'm looking to count. Here, they're already present. I'm just then going through trying to find themes.
So instead, like with music lyrics, instead of taking words out and going, okay, I'm looking.
This works out great because that's the example I was going to use to show the difference.
Well, and that's the first thing I looked at was instead of taking these words out and going, okay, are they aggressive, or and defining them, I'm taking maybe full sentences and going, what is the theme, or what does this sentence mean, or what are these words together? How do I interpret them? Are they integrating?
Yeah.
And then going through and finding.
Yes. Now understand that when I say I want to get those transcripts, I want to get the, like with the lyrics, I still want to see the performance. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Can I see me over here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I've got a content analysis. Versus a narrative. Okay, and I've got a song, all right? And I'm looking at the lyrics, and I've got an F word over here, and I've got lyrics here, and they said the N word, and I've got lyrics over here, and they said the B word, and I got lyrics over here, and they say the GD word, and I got over here, and they say the F word again. And my content, huh?
It's gin and juice, I
Yeah.
can tell. Stupid drag.
Oh my God.
And I'm looking here to see how many times does this artist use foul language, or what's considered foul language in our society, okay? How many times is that used? And Bum's shaking his head and he's saying, what's foul, what's not? Okay, understood. In a content analysis, I have to make that distinction. What's considered foul language, what's not? Is hell a bad word? Is ass a bad word? If you throw the hole on the end of it, does that make it a bad word? So you've got to think about those types of things. Is the foul language, the bad words, the things you can't say on public television? Or is it just anything that our society determines is foul language? So in content analysis, that's what I'm doing.
Is that code book then?
That's part of your code book.
So you developed the code prior to listening to the
Yes.
artifact?
Yep.
And say, these are the key words that we're looking for.
This
If
is-
they exist, then therefore it equals.
Yeah. Yep. This is developed through your literature review and what other researchers have defined as foul language. Okay? So I've got that definition and I'm determining, okay, this is a bad word, 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 this is a bad word.
The song's bad.
That's not necessarily a bad word, we'll leave that one. Not a bad word, that one's okay. That's a bad word and it's really gross. Okay, so I'm counting how many occurrences these words were used. Okay, and that's how I'm defining, is this a negative song? And by my definition, if it has so many of these words in it, this is a negative song. Okay, over here in this narrative analysis, now I'm looking at it and I'm going, okay, what was this writer's mentality? Did this writer mean for this to be a negative, hateful song? Was this meant to be a degrading song? And so I've got to look at the thing, what's being used here, the context. Okay, well, he said the F word over here, but it was a pretty happy moment because the terms are used. I'm effing elated, okay? And here he used the N word and he used it in a loving term for a friend. And here he used the B word, and that was pretty negative because he was talking about his ex and how horrible she was, so we're going to say that's negative. Here he used GD, and again, he was happy. He was using it kind of as an adjective, an exclamation to show how pumped up he was. And the same thing here. And here really is kind of neutral. Really didn't mean anything by, just, it rhymed.
Yes.
Okay?
He's like alternative existentialist artist, okay? Remembering what's right.
So, what I'm doing here with narrative analysis is I'm trying to find out something about this songwriter. And I'm looking at the way the terms are used, and over here I'm looking at it and I'm saying, is it a positive or a negative song? Does it give a positive connotation, a negative connotation? Is it the kind of song I would play for my mother? No. Okay? Bad song. Shouldn't go on the air, shouldn't listen to it. Over here, I'm doing a narrative analysis because I want to know more about this songwriter and his or her experiences. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, oh, it wasn't language that I would have preferred to see, but it was kind of a positive vibe. I mean, he was positive. He was using the terminology, those words, to show enthusiasm for expression. Okay, That's what you're doing with the narrative analysis. You're trying to find out about this person. Narrative analysis are used a lot in biographies.
Excuse me, sir, but don't you think that using only transcripts takes away the way that people interpret what they actually perform?
That's what I was saying. Use the transcript so you make sure you get the one, because I don't have a clue what they said. I can't understand them, can't tell what they're saying, not a clue. Okay, we went to a Christian rock concert a couple of weeks ago, and they have a heavy metal band that ends it. And in between their songs, they'll preach a little bit of a message. Nice message, very uplifting message for me. Then they start singing, I'm like, they could be singing, I'm going to rip the skin off your face, and I would have no idea. Okay? So you want the transcripts to go with this so you can make sure you're getting the words that they're talking about. All right? And then you may think about, well, what about like with their music videos? Well, what were the pictures in the video like? And you're looking for themes. Okay? You're describing.
Thank you.
Okay? But again, narrative analysis, very good for using with biographies. Why do you think that is? Remember, look at the documents you're going to be looking at. Why would they be good for bios?
Because you're taking a look at the entirety of the biography versus a moment in time, and
Could be.
you're diving into it from the holistic perspective.
It could be. Think about Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln had 1 mental breakdown, 2. I don't remember. He got really down at one point. Okay. Was he the same person then as he was when he became president? Or let's take a step back. Then, as when he became a senator, is that right? He's a senator, yeah. When he became a senator, he finally won, because he got defeated how many times? He finally won, and then when he became president, and then when he was president during the Civil War, okay? So you could take a look at his presidency during the Civil War and do a biographical sketch, do a narrative analysis of him during that time. And so you would look at his letters, you would look at his diary, you might look at newspaper articles that were written about him, but you're going to be looking for these types of things to see how did he view the world, how did he view his presidency versus how did the media view him.
But isn't it true if you only look at that time, how do you know whether it was a dark time or not?
That's just, you're just wanting to find out about that time. You're going to be able to tell from his letters, when you're looking at his letters to his wife, to his children, to his generals, to all those things, you can look at that and by reading what he's writing in there, come up with the themes. And you don't really have to have that code book beforehand because, again, remember, constant comparative analysis, that's what you're doing in qualitative research. You really don't know what you're going to see until you start looking at it. And so as you're looking through those documents, you start noticing themes. He seemed really despondent here when he was talking about how the battle was going. And at the same time period, he wrote a letter to his wife. And he seemed very positive, very upbeat, very, very happy, very fulfilled, which would be a miracle given what we know about Mary Todd Lincoln. Okay? And then he wrote this letter to, had a letter that he wrote, or a memo, interoffice memo that he wrote to the vice president. And it was very coarse and very curt and very negative. But then he had this letter to his child, to his son, and how positive and upbeat it was and hopeful about the future. And so what can we discern from that? Well, we're looking at the letters to his colleagues and to his generals and to his cabinet, and he's really painting a picture of the world for them. And then he's painting a different picture for his family. And so we see a President A who could be conflicted. He's just really not sure what he's thinking. Or B, one that's going to be very honest with these people over here about what's going on in the world, and he's going to try and shelter his family. Or he may be feeling this way about the world, and over here he doesn't want them to get cocky, doesn't want them to get lazy, and so he's giving a little kick in the butt in his writing. And that's our job as researchers to discern between those two, what are we seeing here out of him, and draw some conclusions. It could be this, it could be this, it could be this. Okay? Biographies, work as a thesis. They work as a dissertation. You can do those. Think there's any interviewing, in-depth interviewing going on here? Any observation?
Narrative.
Observation of the narrative, but that's it. Your data collection is document analysis. Okay? What else do we need to talk about?
So is that something that should not happen then? Like, say that you're doing a narrative analysis and someone that's living, someone's biography there, if you wanted to get more information, like interview them, would that be frowned upon while doing a narrative analysis, or?
Would it turn it into a different kind of
Yeah.
thesis?
You're going to be pushing it into another methodology, simply because if I'm going to do that, I might as well just do the in-depth interview.
Right, okay.
I'll use the document analysis to help with the interviews, to help me get my data, but I'm just wanting to look at the documents and read from that.
Okay.
So it's only documents, like if, for instance, if I want to analyze a film, I will have to get the actual, what's the name of it? The transcript of the film?
The film script?
Yeah, the film script. Because, I mean, because in cinematography.
Honestly, if you can, is it absolutely essential? No. I mean, you can watch the narrative. It's a narrative. It's not a document analysis. It's a narrative analysis.
Yeah.
So you could do the analysis just off the film, just a little more difficult.
Okay.
Because, you know, as they're saying things and as ideas are going by and you're trying to write it down, we're on the next scene. What happened? What did I miss? Okay, you're gonna have to watch it a couple more times. If you've got the transcript and you kind of go through, or not the transcript in the film, the script, and you go through that script and make some notes,
Yes.
and then watch it and see what else you're missing, that's gonna be helpful.
Okay.
Doesn't have to happen that way. You can do a narrative analysis of evening news and watch several evening news episodes and see how they tend to frame stories. Like do a narrative analysis of NBC nightly news during an election year, during that month leading up to the election, and how are they framing the story? You're looking to see, are they more liberal, are they more conservative, are they more fair and unbiased? Okay, by looking at the different type of coverage. Now, part of what you're going to get into, and this is where you get, I did a thesis. I was on a thesis this year. I actually was the chair, but it was a student that was at the end of that 8-year window. Don't do that. Get it done. Please, God, get it done. You get to that end of that 8 years, you're trying to cram that thing together, and all of her committee, gone. So we had to throw 3 people together who really weren't there from the get-go of this thing to finish it up. She did what she called a critical analysis of the evening news. We'll talk about that on Tuesday, and it's very similar to narrative. You just go in another step. But she was looking at how they framed stories. And I'm looking at it going, I don't see how she's doing the critical analysis of this. This seems more like a content analysis. That would be more appropriate. And she said, it's used more. That's why I wanted to extend myself and do something different. So she did the critical, which I applaud her for. But if you start just looking for specific terms, content, if you're looking at themes like facial expressions and ways they covered a story and when they used it and how they talked about it, and you're looking at the text that they used and you're trying to build a theme out of that, themes, okay? The main reason why you do a content analysis with 2 is to avoid the bias. So you get that intercode reliability. One person can do narrative because we're looking to interpret. It doesn't have to be reliable. Because I'm going to look at it, do the same sort of analysis again, and I'm probably going to interpret it the same way. All right? But Aaron may look at it and look at it differently, and then Chase may look at it and look at it totally differently. Why? We're 3 different people. We have 3 different experiences. We have 3 different interpretations. And that's okay. Bum.
So, I may be changing my idea again, because it's getting one. Huffington Post versus Drudge. The Drudge report, they use the exact same facts. This happened, this many people voted for it, and here's why it's bad. Same thing, here's why it's good. That'd be good.
Be a comparison and contrast, yeah. I didn't do a study on it, but I was interested in it. I was in St. Louis when the Cardinals and the Royals played one year, and read the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and they talked about how the Cardinals just blew this game, that they were the better team, and they let it get away, and they made this bad play and that bad play, and they lost the game. And I was like, I wonder how the Star covered that. So I got back to our hotel, and I got online and read KC.com, and the Royals had just won the World Series. I mean, they played out of their heads. They made all the right plays. That they shut down the Cardinals' potent bats with some great pitching and great defense. And you're looking at the narrative and the way they covered it, and the themes and the way they talked about those two teams, and it's totally different. Okay, same game, same result, two different perspectives.
I'm not asking who this person was, and I hope it doesn't go off topic, but 8-year window, can you explain what that means?
8-year window?
Yeah, about.
Once you finish your, I don't remember if it's when you start or when you finish your coursework in your master's, you have 8 years to finish your thesis, or you have to start all over again.
Oh, I thought it was that you had that was from the time that you started the grad program, and then 8 years went from that. I thought that's what it was.
I can explain because I did. This is my second time. I nearly halfway through the first time, got hired by a company, and I was on the road, so I couldn't, we didn't have, this is pre-online, so I was never here, just like I haven't really been here in this class either, but anyway, I couldn't get it done, so I come back, and they said, oh, everything's changed, so you have to re-enroll. And the classes I had to retake hadn't changed at all, but I still had to re-enroll. Anyway, this is my second go around in the same master's program. So don't do that. I agree with him. Do not do that.
I was just checking, because I was like, 8 year window.
Yeah.
That's a
It's a bigger deal when you work on your PhD and people get ABD, all the dissertation. They've done the classes, they've done the comps, but they haven't written their dissertation, and they go, I think it's 6 years for your dissertation. No, 10 years. I think it's 10. And they don't get their dissertation written. I'm like, why on earth would you put yourself through all that not to finish?
It sounds impossible, but when you get a job offer, and it's, a very nice job offer, 6-figure job offer, you say, see ya. That's what happened to me.
Side note, don't ever do any of this. Okay? A couple notes to point out. Number one, with narrative analysis, we use hermeneutics. What is hermeneutics?
I really have no idea.
I don't even know the word.
I don't even know what that means.
Hermeneutics, you're looking at context. You're looking at the context. What context was this written in? What context, what time frame was this written in? If we think about films, we might think about Francis Ford Coppola. And quite honestly, I don't know film producers and writers and things like that. I don't pay attention to that part of it when I watch a movie. But look at his early work versus his later work, okay? You might have somebody who does a lot of films, look at Stephen King and does all the horror films. Well, look at his early work and then say, for instance, he got married and had kids and had a wonderful, happy life, and did his theme and his films change from that time? Look at the context around it.
Robert De Niro from
From
criminal into some silly comedies now.
Yeah. Okay, and look at how, we're trying to figure out what was it about their life that changed. Now, why is this important to us? Why is this relevant to us as researchers? We talked about we want to add to the body of knowledge. Who cares why Robert De Niro changed the kinds of films he made? Who cares about that?
A pretty important trend in like movies. If you can see that an actor or director has kids and that changes the way they make films, then that could potentially change the way production companies hire them on and want them to write certain things. A lot of that actually reminds me of Moneyball, which I know we've talked about here in the past, about how like with one situation, someone saw a batter and realized that they hit better when their parents are in town and watching them, and couldn't afford to have them travel down, so the company or the sports team paid for the parents to come and watch the game, and that led to them hitting better. There's like
I forgot about that.
Those intangible variables that can actually be kind of brought to the front with narrative analysis.
I wasn't even thinking that deep. I was just thinking Robert De Niro's fans would like to know more about Robert De Niro and why did his film change. And film scholars might want to know why do some change and others don't. And you start seeing a trend that, well, something happens, something significant happened in their lives along the way. Okay, so They went from being very, very positive and then had a bout with depression or a bout with substance abuse or something like that, and suddenly they got very negative. So you're looking for those types of things, but you have to look at that context. You also need to examine the original purpose. What do we mean by that?
Like, is it on your end, like your original purpose of the study, or like what they are doing?
The original purpose of your study,
Okay.
but also their purpose. President Lincoln, when he became president, what was his purpose? What was he trying to accomplish? Well, he was trying to keep the Union together. Okay? So as we go through the time, and I'm looking at his letters and his diary, I almost said blog, his diary, are we seeing some differences as the war is progressing, as the war is moving along? John, you were going to say something.
Oh, I was just gonna say, it's a kind of like, people look at when Huck Finn was written, and then they're putting like our modern Western values on that time period, and they're trying to ban the book. So they're not, in that case, not looking at the context, not looking at whatever the word you said was.
That's it, the hermeneutics.
Yeah, hermeneutics.
That's a great example.
Semantics.
That's a great example. We're looking at Mark Twain's work, okay? They're wanting to ban Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, for example. And we're going to go and look at those books, and we're going to look at what was written and the themes that were given there, and what was his purpose at that time that he wrote that book. And yeah, there's some racism in the book, but was he putting it there? Or was he stating what was there, and he's trying to show, because, you know, in that day and age, a young teenage boy and an old, was Jim a slave or former slave? Former slave. Are not going to be buddies probably, but they were thick as thieves. And was he talking about this is a good thing and this ought to be okay? Yeah, I see what I did there. Thick as thieves, Huck Finn, that made sense. You know, what's he trying to show? Okay, so we're looking at the purpose. Okay, so that gives us some information.
You kind of touched on my question, because when you talk about original purpose, is that interpreted through the eyes of the researcher, or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is someone who's passed away, so now we're sort of...
Yeah, you have to interpret it yourself. You're trying to interpret it.
We're trying to say, this is exactly what this is exactly what Mark Twain's purpose was.
Right.
But we didn't interview him.
We don't know for sure.
Right.
But as we see a theme building through this, if it's just one isolated incident in this entire story where a young teenage boy befriends a former black slave, the rest of the time Huck Finn is really cruel to former slaves or current slaves, we can't really say that Mark Twain's trying to demonstrate, you know, we all are equal, we all are human, we all have meaning and value. Color of skin shouldn't matter. If that's what he's trying to say, and that theme continues through the book,
so in your interpretation, are you also analyzing like past interviews? Because he may reveal his theme publicly in a newspaper interview. Or
you're not just looking at that book. You're looking for anything you can find that deals with Huck Finn and what they're talking about.
So articles of the day, like reasonable.
Yeah. Mike.
For instance, you can even take this class and do that right now since it's being recorded.
Mm-hmm.
When we discuss people who aren't white, we say whether they're black or Hispanic. When we discuss people who are white, we leave that out because it's the default position.
Good point. Good point.
You didn't say whether Huck is black or white.
True. It's a good point. Okay. But those are things to think about. It offers us a perspective for interpreting legends, stories, and other texts. We get a perspective for, for interpreting legends, stories, and other texts. So like we were talking about, as you're looking at the filmmakers, and we've come to realize these films by Robert De Niro changed after this significant thing that happened in his life. And we see other stories that have changed, other texts that have changed by other writers. Well, we got a perspective and maybe it had that same sort of thing. Okay. Okay, some methods for analyzing the stories: biographical, psychological, and linguistic tools. Biographical, psychological, and linguistic tools. We can use those for analyzing the stories. How did Abraham Lincoln's perspective change as he went from a struggling young self-taught lawyer to a failed politician to a senator to the president? Sarah, you got your hand up.
Sorry, what were those again? Methods?
Biographical, psychological, and linguistic tools. So we can look at the language that was used. With this group over here, he was very direct, very negative, very threatening, you might say. If you don't win, this is what's going to happen. To this group over here, he's very positive. I see things looking up, our forces are advancing, and death tolls are falling, what have you.
I think you could run some really good comparative analysis with doing, like you look at TV programs, and as far as like language, it's not allowed on TV because it's considered, you know, cuss word or racial or something like that. But then you look at the theme of how many sexual themes are on more and more on every TV program now. It seems like that's the popular thing to do, is add sexual themes or innuendos and stuff like that. And I mean, you could almost do comparative analysis as far as how lenient they are on one side versus the other.
Yeah. And that's a good example, is you can, one thing that we like to do is look at the type of shows that are being aired and what's being allowed by the FCC, which is a government-appointed agency, and then what's our government? Is it very Democrat? Is it very Republican? And we like to look at those types of things and see, well, what does our media look like when this party is in power and they're appointing the FCC versus this party being in power? Does the landscape change? Are more things permitted? Are more things regulated? Okay. Focus may be on influence of gender, race, and ethnicity. You may focus on those types of things. The focus may be on thoughts or motivations, the why. And then linguistically, you could be looking at their tone, their pitch, pauses they take, intonation, not necessarily just the words used, but are they pausing for more effect? When I watch the news and reporting, the thing about print journalism versus broadcast journalism, they may use the same words, okay? But if I'm reading it in print, I can't see the person sitting there typing going, they're typing up the story. They're trying, and they're giving all the facts. They're being unbiased. They're giving this side and this side. They're all balanced. Versus the news anchor who is reporting this and going, on the other hand, and I can see by the tone of voice, I can see by the facial expression, I can watch those types of things. So that's where just using the transcripts isn't necessarily going to be enough. All right? But you see where there's the parallel between the quantitative and the qualitative, between the content and the narrative? Could you do a mixed method with a content and a narrative? Yeah. Be pretty easy. Why would you? Why would you? See, that's an example right there. Why would you? Obviously, I'm not for it.
Well, I don't know. I mean, over here, first you have to count the times that you use all the derogatory language before you can say that it wasn't actually derogatory.
Okay, first you could. That's one way you could do this. That's a great example. Is we could do a content analysis of certain songs and say these songs appear to be very, very negative. And that's telling us what is there by the count. However, more depth analysis through a narrative analysis, looking at the themes, looking at the context, tells us these songs aren't really that derogatory, or they're not derogatory at all. okay? You wouldn't have to do that. You wouldn't have to say they're derogatory. You could just start here and say where former studies have looked only at the count, this study is proposing to look at the themes and the context surrounding them. Okay?
How, that's kind of using the content analysis though, because you're using
But you're not doing the
results.
content analysis. That's just part of in your literature review, you're talking about people that studied songs, people that studied music by doing a count, by doing a content analysis. You're not necessarily going to use the same 10 songs here and here. In my literature review, I'm saying content analysis have been used to death to count. And these songs are coming across as being very negative. However, they're only looking at terms. This study is going to go more in depth and look at the themes and look at the context in which the words are used to determine, are these songs actually negative, derogatory songs? And you do your count and come to find out these words aren't being used in a derogatory manner. They're being used more for emphasis, to emphasize happiness. I mean, who was it, Gallagher, that said the F word is the only word in the English language that has, like, can be used as a noun, as a verb, as an adjective, as an adverb, you know, and so we're looking at it, and here I'm looking at it saying that's a bad word, and that shouldn't be in a song, and that makes that song really negative. And over here, it's being used, F yeah! Pass my comps! Woohoo! It's not being used in a negative way, it's being used for emphasis. That's a positive. Okay, and so you have to look at it in another way.
Joe Pesci and Goodfellas, fuck you, you fucking fuck. One
Good one.
The meaning of words have changed through time as well. So if you use the FCC example of what was allowable and what is currently allowable, and then, you know, sort of use the narrative analysis to study the content analysis, which is what I think you're saying there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that makes sense that, you know, words change over time.
Yeah. Now,
and over ethnic groups and gender groups.
True. Very true. Now, what you could do is take somebody's content analysis that they did and say, we want to expand on this, and you go find the songs that they did and say they determined that these songs were very negative. And we're going to look at those same songs through a more in-depth lens and do a narrative analysis of them. So there, yes, you're using you're just not doing the content analysis yourself.
Now, what about doing? What about doing a narrative analysis to kind of get your definition, to get your perception on the themes and to define those themes, and then doing a focus group to see with maybe the same lyrics to find out if people are receiving that interpretive theme the same way?
Yeah, you could do that. You're getting into a mixed method doing 2 qualitative studies, and keep in mind that that's 2 big studies. So I would do the narrative analysis first, and do the focus group as a separate study, as opposed to trying to do them one as one.
And that's what I was meaning.
Yeah.
But would you be able to use the same?
And that's what you all as young researchers should be doing, is developing your line of research. And that doesn't mean you do the same methodology. You've done the research to come up with these themes, and now I want to, well, this is how I'm interpreting these themes, this is how it's being used. Now I want to go to a focus group, taking what I've studied, what I've looked at. I'm not going to tell them how I've interpreted it, but I'm going to give them the same data and ask them their perceptions and their opinions. And if we agree, I might be onto something. If we disagree, maybe I'm off a little bit. Okay? Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I was like, who else had a question? Yes, ma'am.
It's more like a question about the content analysis, about counting occurrences, because I.
Whoa, hang on. You're asking me for quantitative stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a separate class. See, I'm only getting paid for this one, not that.
Well, okay.
Do I have to get a little tip in here or something?
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
If you would have only transcript of this, it would look really bad.
Yes, ma'am.
I was just gonna say, what is the purpose of like counting, like the words? Like, why would you say that having so many words would be good thing or a bad thing? Like that is my question.
What would be the purpose of it?
Yeah, yeah.
This is a whole lot easier than this. I could generalize this across more songs because I've got a co-coder, so I've got more reliability that I can duplicate it. And if 2 of us are agreeing on this or 3 of us are agreeing on this, then we're kind of thinking along the same lines that the use of this type of language, I don't care what, I'm not worried about the themes. I'm more concerned about just the words and what they could mean, okay? Because I think these words are bad words for our society, that they're negative just in and of themselves. And if we've got a lot of songs with this many words in them, those are not good songs. And if we've got a lot of songs with that kind of language, then we need to have a rating system for music. Okay, so our children don't get it, so they don't start speaking that way, so you know, that sort of thing. Versus, I don't think words in and of themselves are bad. I mean, we came up with the words. We're the ones that defined what SHIT means and why it's a bad word. I mean, pencil could mean the same thing, but because we gave pencil or pen, this is a pen, you know, this could be shit. I'm gonna use my shit and write some shit down, you know? Okay? That's not bad. But if I said, you're full of pen, and this society determined pen was a bad word, okay, so I don't think words in and of themselves are bad. I want to look at those words that our society's determined are bad and how they're being used, and that's how I'm going to determine if these songs are negative. Okay? It just kind of begins, or depends on your perspective.
Okay.
When I bought my house, they said I had a lagoon. I thought, that's great, I didn't even know there's a creek near.
Yeah, I know, I did the same thing.
It's like, oh, and it's like, no, it's a cesspool. We don't want to say cesspool, that's nasty. Well, the reason that word's nasty is because of what it means. Now you just want a perfectly good word, lagoon.
And now you have a lagoon in your backyard.
I'm gonna take a swim in your lagoon.
Yeah. Your lagoon wouldn't fix that.
Okay? Other questions, other comments? Again, this would be a great way, and every one of these methods I talked about, I want to try one of these. I'd like to do a biography on somebody and use this method. I just haven't decided who I'm really interested in enough to do this. Because it's going to take a lot of document analysis. You're going to have to go through a lot of stuff. You have to find it. You have to determine, is it credible? You have to determine, I can think about if you go online and go on the website, start looking up stuff, are you going to use Wikipedia for your biographical sketch?
No.
Honestly, I don't have a problem with Wikipedia as a first source to look at and then go look at their references and start pulling those up and then cross-checking and things like that. It's a great way to get a start, but so you got to know, are these documents legitimate? Are they reliable? And then you're going to have to go through a lot of them and determine, what themes am I seeing here as I read through this? What kind of things do keep occurring? And then, now do they keep occurring in this one, but now they're different? And that's fine, because if this group here is from a similar time, and then you think about what happened during that time. I had a student last year who was going to wanted to do a narrative analysis on Theodore Seuss Geisel, Dr. Seuss. And he was looking at his stories that he wrote and how those stories changed over time, the themes changed over time, because if memory serves, it was either the Great Depression or the start of the World War when he started, I can't remember which, but something was happening worldwide. And then as we got more into the 60s, when he was still writing, you had civil rights and everything that were getting really amped up. And so his writing changed. What world events were changing his writing? So you need to look at the time period when he's writing, or she's writing, or this is being made, what was happening that might have influenced it. Is this person influenced by these things? Is this person just going to be steadfast in one belief and follow through no matter what anybody says? What is it?
So this is all what you do for narrative analysis, or can you do that for content analysis as well?
Narrative.
So you shouldn't look at the historical context of content analysis.
You can, but what you would typically do there is you're going to compare, like Aaron was looking at the language used in songs, over different time periods.
Okay.
When you study an artifact that, say, is an author, and you're studying their literature, do you have to take into account the publisher's influence? I mean, oftentimes you read, I had to cut this or that because the publisher said it wouldn't sell, and, you know, so how do you account for a change in theme when it's not intended?
And that's the kind of thing you're gonna find if you just read the book and try and get your themes off of that. Okay, well, you got the theme of that book. But if you wanna find out about the author, you're gonna need to see if you can find that author's notes for the book.
So it
if you
depends
can
on
find
what you're
drafts of the
analyzing,
book.
the literature or the author.
Yeah, if you can find interviews that were conducted where that author might have said, well, my publisher maybe yanked that. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay? Other questions, comments?